Lately, our top mods folder has been overflowing with you guys sending in photos of respraying your bikes and restoring old bikes. And frankly, you've inspired me to do the same. So I'm going to be respraying this Canyon Grizzle carbon frame, and I'm going to be showing how you can do it at home with a few 90s inspired cool effects as well. First of all, you're going to need some cleaning products. Now, I've got some muck off wash here and also some disc brake cleaner, because basically you don't want any residue left on your frame. You want it fully cleaned before you start. Ideally, you want to go for some isopropyl alcohol over there. I don't have that at the moment, so disc brake cleaner it is. I've also got a waxed cloth here, which would be great for taking any lint or dust off of the frame, because the better you can get the frame in the start, then the better your paint finish will be in the end. Now, I've also got a lot of sandpaper here. Wet and dry sandpaper would be the best. I've got a 180 grit here, I've got a 320 and a 1500 as well. The finer the grain you can get, then the smoother the finish, especially if you're sanding off any decals like I've got here. I've also got a sanding block and just a few bits to rough up the frame as well. And then I need to cover any holes, so that means masking tape. I've also got a sponge here that I've got a little bit of water on, because that tends to dampen down the masking tape and make it seal better. I've also got a nice park tool blade here and some scissors just for cutting those. And then we want some protective gear for when we're doing the spray. I've got a dust mask here and some protective eyewear. And also you can use some clothing protection suits like this if you want to. I've just got my slacks on today, and I think some of these dust sheets or any kind of cardboard to protect your working area, protect the floor or protect your work stand is a really good idea as well. And then finally, the main event over here is your spray paint. I've gone for a carbon primer by Spray Bike here. Now, you can get a 2K primer out there as well. This is clear. It should just make your paint stick to the frame better. But a 2K primer in a color would be really good for making you have a blank canvas to put your colors on. I've gone for a couple of colors here, just a pink, a turquoise and a silver finish. I'll show you how to do some effects with all of those three later on. And then you just want a frame transparent finish here. You can get a transparent with glitter in it, and a 2K finish would be ideal for protecting your frame and your paintwork afterwards, but it does come with some nasty chemicals. That means you need a much more substantial breathing mask if you use that. So I'm just using a thinner sort of satin finish for today. And then also I've got some decals at the end to make it look like a really pro finish. The first thing you want to do is sand down any bumps like from the decals. So here Canyon have done a really good job of painting the decals on. All of those ridges, if you can feel it, then you're going to see it through the paintwork when it's finished. You're going to need to sand those down. And obviously, because it's carbon, I'm going in by hand rather than by machine, because you can get a little bit carried away and you don't want to accidentally wear any holes into your frame. So this is the cringy bit, but basically I'm starting with a 180 and I'm just going to start taking those decals off. Now, obviously, I know that this has been primed, so once you start to see the color change, then you're starting to get through to the underlayers of the prime. But generally, you just want to do it until you can't feel those ridges anymore. Also, once I've started with 180, just test it and see how much of a score that makes. If that's too scratchy, if the scores are too deep, then go to a finer grit, so that's a higher number. So I might want to move to the 320 in a minute. As you can see, they're coming straight off. And also I'm going to blend this ridge between the dark pink and the light pink, because I can feel that. But The rule of thumb is you don't need to take it down to bare carbon. In fact, you don't really want to. We're going to prime it later to make sure that the paint sticks. But in this instance, we just want a smooth finish. Also, if you're worried about taking it down to a finer paint, you can always spray a couple of coats of primer over the top or use a thicker priming putty, which will fill any gaps as well. So now I've sanded it all down, all the edges and the decals, and I'm just going to use this sort of scouring pad to buff it up and just take off that satin glossy finish. And you certainly want to do this if you've got a gloss finish, because anything really glossy and slippery means that the paint might not adhere to it as well. So just buff up your entire frame. Now, obviously I'm working with a carbon frame here, and just a word on aluminium. You can buff down your paint job for an aluminium frame, but for about 80 or so pounds, you can take an aluminium frame to a sandblaster's and get it down to raw, and that would be ideal, but you can't do that with carbon, so this will have to do. Next up, you just want to make sure it's really clean. You need to clean off all of this dust, any debris or grit or dirt that's still on your frame. Anything that's left over means that the paint might not actually adhere to the frame. So the better you can do this, the better your paint will be finished at the end. Now I'm using some muck off cleaner. I'm going to spray a bit of degreaser to it as well, and some disc brake cleaner so it evaporates and make sure there's nothing on there. Ideally, you want some isopropyl alcohol as well. Now, before you spray your bike, you're going to want to tape up anything that you don't want sprayed. So that means everything that doesn't already have paint on it is probably a good indicator that you don't want to get paint in there again. So you don't want paint to go into the threads of your bolts. You need to cover those up, and you don't want it to go into your bottom bracket. Maybe cover up your headset as well, because if you're putting loads of layers down, then things like headsets might not drop in again. So anything that doesn't have paint on it already, cover it up. Bonus tip is to get a bit of water on a sponge and just wet that tape, that masking tape or frog tape or whatever you want to use, just so it gets a better seal and it will stick a bit better. So you just want to score the tape around where you can see the edge. Don't push too hard. Maybe lift it and then score it until it starts to come away. So protect your bottle cage bolt holes here and the threads inside. What you can do is either put something in there, like some cloth or a Q-tip or an earbud, or you can get the bolts that came out of it and just tape up the outside of the bolt, like so, and then put the bolt back in. So now the fiddly bit's over and done with, and I know it's annoying, but stick with it because good prep means less time fixing your mistakes afterwards. And then we're going to go ahead and prime it. I've got a transparent primer here. I think the color will be fine, but if you are doing anything with a really light color, I would go for a really light colored primer, maybe like a gray or a white, because that way your color will come through true. If you're doing a really dark color or a metallic two-tone, for example, I would go with a really dark primer, just so that those colors feel really deep. At this point, I'm going to put my mask on and my protective eyewear. These are nice glasses, but I've scratched these to death, so they're now my protective eyewear. So after you've given a little initial squirt just to get any gunk out, do a nice light sweeping motion. This doesn't have to be laid on thick, it's just the primer. Unless you're using a primer color, then you want it to look entirely the primer color, whereas this is just making the paint stick better. So now for the really exciting bit. And before you dive straight in, it's a good idea to sort of prep what finish you want. Have a look for some inspiration on Instagram from, say, Spray Bike. They've got some great ideas of the effects you can do with rattle cans. And I'm going to try Spray Bike because it's bike specific, but I'm also going to be trying a car rattle can as well, because it's basically half the price. Word to the wise though, if you're going to be using two different brands, make sure you do a tester, because some paints can react together and you might get a crackle or it might not stick properly. So yeah, let's have a go on a little fade from pink to turquoise. Also, make sure you're doing it in a wide open space. Even with a mask, these sprays can sort of linger around in the air and they can get into your lungs, which isn't great. Do it outside like I'm doing it. So for my fade, I actually want to go from turquoise to pink to turquoise again. Now, I kind of want to follow Canyon's fade diagonal here, but I also want to match that up here. So it's a good idea to just sort of mark it out a little bit. So that's where I want my turquoise to end there. And diagonal is probably about here, because that way, when I put my stickers and my decals on here, and I'm going to spray over a silver, then the fade will come through the decals when I take those off. You'll see. Big tip from Bristol Cycle Restorations is to lay down your dark color, and if you're doing a fade, then you want to put your light color on over the top, as it will blend a lot better. So let's get going. And what you want to do is shake up the can in a kind of whisking motion. Up and down might not mix it all up, so just get it all around. The better you do this, the more even your paint will be. And get yourself a bit of test cardboard or something so that you can, first of all, spray out the gunk, but also give yourself a little bit of test time to make sure that your spraying is even, and you get a little tester to see how you need to spray it so that you don't get any dribbles. So as I've learnt with this paint, I need to be about 5 centimeters or so away from the frame. And what you want to do is do a nice even spraying motion. You want to start spraying before you hit the frame, and then keep going when you've run off, so that you don't get any squirts or dribbles or unsightly thick and thin areas. Maybe a bit closer. There we go. Now obviously you're going to get some spray off, so when it comes to my fade in the middle, I'm probably going to cover up these areas so that I don't get any pink on my turquoise or any turquoise on my pink. And this tape is just a guide. I don't actually want to make an edge. Just remember that when you're spraying this side, it's obviously going to spray that. So if you're doing any kind of Klein-esque sprays or fades, do bear that in mind. You're going to have to cover parts that you don't want sprayed if that's the look you're going for. Now I've chosen a super matte undercoat, which is really tough to work with. If you want to be a bit more haphazard, I recommend metallics. They're a lot more forgiving. Now I didn't really want to make an edge on this. I did get a little bit close. It was just a guide, so I know where to stop my fade. But that gives you a good idea of what happens when you mask up and then spray over the top and do a sort of a negative sticker reverse there. Now, if you've been super pro and you accidentally put an edge in there, you might want to sand it out with a really fine grit, like a 1500 or a 3200. But this is my undercoat. I'm putting another one over the top, so it shouldn't show that much. Now, pink spray, I think pink is lighter. So what I'm going to do is spray from the outside or from the middle and sort of ease off the spraying at the edge and let it fade over the turquoise. Now, don't forget your mixing and your whisking, and don't forget your initial spray and a little bit of a practice. Now, as I said before, don't forget that the paint will fall down onto stuff, but I'm going for a fade and I don't mind it falling because I think the effect's gonna look really nice after I do my masking effect. I'm just gonna let a little bit drip in the front because I quite like that fade effect and I want that to come through on my head badge. So that's all done. That's my first coat, my undercoat. Leave that to dry for about 20 minutes, although ideally if you've got all the time in the world, 2 hours, maybe even 24 hours would be best. Can't wait. I've let that cure for about an hour now, so it's all touch dry. It will be a little bit fragile for probably a day or a week, so if that's your final coat, then go easy. But what I'm gonna do now is I've got a mix of decals, some Canyon decals, which I'm gonna put on the frame in various places, because what I wanna do is spray a metallic silver over the top of all my stickers and a bit of torn masking tape here and there, so that when I pull those decals off, that fade is gonna come through on the Canyon writing. Now, I'd love to have Canyon all over the place, but I don't have enough stickers, so this is the torn taped method. So you can either use really thin masking tape and make shapes or squiggles, or you can get some big tape like this and literally just tear it into little pieces and put them about the place. And then when you come to spray the silver, obviously everything that is torn tape will be your fade. So I might be sure to make sure there's some really good big opening tapes up by the fade, because I really like that fade there. And yeah, basically just go to town on it. Also, if you check out Spray Bike's Instagram for some inspiration, they use loads of other effects. You can actually put washing up liquid on your frame, and then when you come to spray over it, you can blast off all of that washing up liquid while the paint is still a little bit tacky, and it will leave like run effects so that your fade comes through that other overcoat. Right, we're all stickered up, so everything that's a sticker should have the fade come out through this silver. And as I said, I'm using a car spray just to see how that differs from the bike spray. It's metallic, so it should be quite glossy, but always do a tester to make sure that the two paints don't react. And as always, put your protective gear on. This is the exciting bit. Right, it's time for the first big reveal. We've got my trusty Park Tool UP2, where I'm just gonna pick off all of these decals and reveal the fade from underneath. Let's see how we've done. Wow, look at that. Oh, it's so exciting. A little bit of sticky residue here, which I'm just gonna wash off and then do maybe a little bit of sanding if needs be, and then put my clear coat over the top, which will make it nice and smooth and glossy and give it that pro look. Right, this is probably gonna take me a good hour to peel all of these off, so let's skip to the good part and stare at it in finished form. Once I pull all these stickers off, I'm gonna give it a big finishing coat of finishing gloss, like a clear gloss, so it's all nice and smooth and shiny. And then I'm going to put some decals on the down tube there, maybe a little head badge offset over here. Yeah, I can't wait. So here she is, my rattle can yon. Rattle Canyon, get it? In full glory with all the decals and a few bolts and bottle cages on it. And it looks pretty good, I think. I think the only faults have been mine. The paint held up really well. A couple of things I learned in the process is, well, one, I think professionals are worth every penny, because it was laborious and just, it wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be, which should be obvious, but yeah, the pros make it look very easy. But you know what, I got a custom spray job for probably under £50, whereas you're looking at a few hundred with a pro, although I do think it's worth it. But yeah, and another thing that I learned is that I used some cheap masking tape on my torn tape effect, and outside in the sun it got a bit gunky and some residue was left over, which sort of reacted with the paint that I put over the top, the silver paint. So I regret that. My big tip is to go and buy some decent ones. The decals came out so well. In hindsight, I think I should have just bought loads of decals and used them instead of masking tape. Also, because I was trying to get this done in a day's filming, I put the clear coat on as soon as the silver was touch dry, and actually it really wasn't that dry and it started to react, and there is some kind of dribble fade marks where it started to move. So really, if you've got the time, be patient, give every layer at least a day to harden before you put anything on over the top. I really enjoyed the process, and hopefully you enjoyed watching me do this. And let me know, have you been inspired to do this yourself, or have I put you off? I'd like to know in the comments below. But also, how am I going to build this up? I'm thinking maybe a single speed gravel bike, or maybe a fixed gear commuter, or maybe even converting it to a flat bar hipster track Lacoste kind of bike. I don't know. Let me know down in the comments below what you'd like to see me build this up as, and I'll see if I can make it happen for you. Thanks for watching.